All right, here we are in our eighth house group session. So, what I'm going to do initially is a little bit of a class about the eighth house. And the eighth house is kind of interesting because there's just way too much to discuss in order to like possibly cover it all. Even if that's all I did, there's too much to talk about for just one session here. However, or one class. And we're not just doing that because we're going to have an opportunity to share as well. So what I'm going to do is kind of hit the high points and then we can kind of flow with it and see, see where it takes us. I'm a flowy kind of person. So, all right, the eighth house. What is the eighth house in astrology? It's kind of like a random sounding house because it's like, oh, what does it involve? Well, there's sex. Okay, cool. Death, taxes, um, oh yeah, and other people's money. What?
Yeah,
Like, how
me
are
too.
these things even related?
Yeah.
But if you look at the essence of the eighth house, it kind of starts to come together. So, what is the essence of the eighth house? It's important to keep in mind that it's ruled by Scorpio, and Scorpio and the eighth house are all about transformation, essentially. That's the underlying theme of all of it. And when it comes to its relationship to other houses, you can look at it in terms of like the fourth house is where we have much of our psychological foundation created, and it's where we can become aware of some of like the surface level of what's going on with us. But when it's time to either change some of that childhood conditioning that we experienced, or when it's time to explore it more deeply, then we're talking about the eighth house. And its relationship to the seventh house is like, so the seventh house is about official partnerships, right? And it's an air ruled house, like its natural ruler is Libra. So that is air. So this is about, social stuff, mental stuff, intellectual stuff. Like this is a house that's about communication and forming the technical, like official relationships with people. So that includes spouses, long term partnerships, business partners, um, your open enemies, like anybody who has a big impact on your life in a like one-to-one kind of way, in an equal kind of partnership. We're talking about the seventh house. So then when you look at the eighth house, now we're talking not just about like the compromise and how you actually relate to those people. You're talking about how it actually changes you as a person, how you are energetically merged with another person, how you are making money or like financially benefiting from a relationship with a business partner or a spouse. Um, and then when you look at, I don't know, like taxes is kind of just like that's an other people's money thing. I'm not going to get too much into the financial side of this. We talked about like finances a fair amount in the past two sessions, and frankly, I don't think it's the most interesting thing about the eighth house, and not many people mentioned that in their areas of interest. Um, so the eighth house is essentially about energy moving around, how unseen forces impact the world and us. Um, Everything that's hidden, like anything that's hidden, and you're looking for that, or that's coming to the surface, or you're hiding things, being secretive, like that's all eighth house stuff. So the eighth house and Scorpio are largely about the dark, what's in the dark. And when I say dark, I don't necessarily mean like mean or scary or evil or anything like that. I just mean unseen. If there's not a light on it, you don't know what's there. It's in the dark. So it's primarily about transformation and about what's hidden. And divination, the occult, interacting with entities, like doing any kind of channeling work, um, energy work. These are all things, well, like Pisces 12th house can kind of involve energy work too, but these are all 8th house themes, and it's all about what's hidden and about how these unseen forces have power in the world. So when we talk about intimacy as related to the 8th house, this is an important part of the 8th house. Emotional intimacy and vulnerability and physical intimacy is important for the 8th house too. And when it comes to how that plays into transformation and looking inside your own inner world and unconscious, it becomes pretty clear once you actually start to do that kind of work, because the more you become aware of your own unconscious patterns, the less you play them out in interactions with people. Like, have you ever known anyone that was just running their programs constantly? Like, that's all it was. And if you like say something to them that kind of like throws them off their program, like they can't even process it. They're like, and then they just jump back into their program again. These are people that have not been looking into their 8th house, have not been looking into their own inner worlds, and they're just completely unconscious of their own programs. Once we become conscious of our programs, of our conditioning and like behavioral patterns, thought patterns, once we become aware of that, it gives us the ability to see it for what it is. And when we're doing that, we're present. We're actually in the present moment. And that gives us the ability to connect much more deeply with other people and to obviously know ourselves much better and have more just intimacy with our own selves. And like I said, if you've ever known anybody who's like that, who doesn't have any capacity for presence or very, very little, you maybe you know what I'm talking about, how being able to be intimate with yourself is an important part of intimacy just in general, like being self-aware. So that's a pretty big part of what the 8th house is about. And if you're going to be using, any kind of magic, whether you're looking at like practicing Wicca or energy work, or just trying to like manifest stuff into your life through like the stuff in that article, the process, anything like that, it's really important. Or divination, it's another thing. Even just trusting your intuition, just in general, any of those things, the more you look into yourself, the better you're going to be at doing that. Because what happens when we aren't very self-aware is we start projecting what's in our unconscious onto situations around us and people around us. And that can really mess with our intuition and ability to do that kind of, whether you're trying to manifest something, create something, attract something, do any kind of spell work or, rituals, divination, anything like that, it's going to really mess with it. And Hermes said a very, very long time ago, it was like, I don't know, I think 1000 BC or something like that. So it was like, 3,000 years ago. As within, so without, as above, so below. And a lot of times people who are into astrology really like that as above, so below part, because we're there, dude. Like, yeah, Mercury's in retrograde. I'm feeling it, like, oh, it's my lunar return. I'm feeling emotional. We know what's up with that. But that other part of it, as within, so without, what we see around us is a reflection of what's happening within us. And maybe you've known someone like that too. You know, you're sitting next to them outside and you're like, oh, what a beautiful day. And then they start complaining about something, or, you know, you're trying to enjoy coffee together and they start talking about, you know, issues that they're having in a situation, or like the way we experience the world is a direct reflection of what's going on inside of us. And I mean, there are situations where, you know, it's extreme and the way we experience it is going to be impacted somewhat, but it's going to be like a difficult situation either way, like a really serious natural disaster. You know, I mean, you know, I'm not trying to suggest that every single thing that happens in our lives is just a reflection of who we are. Sometimes there are, um, you know, things outside of that, you know, depending on how like deeply spiritual you want to get, talking about oneness and all of that sort of thing. But basically, what I'm getting at is that the way we experience life, the way we see life, and the opportunities that we notice, the way we process those opportunities and how we go at them, the way we interact with people, all of this is very, very dependent on what's happening inside of us. And I think one of the most important things to understand about our unconscious minds is that our unconscious minds do at least a million more times more processing per second than what we can consciously grasp. We really, even if we spend our lives doing this kind of work and make significant discoveries and make a lot of progress and really heal a lot of stuff and you know, transform ourselves in our lives, even if we're doing that, we're still scratching the surface. Like there's a lot going on in there. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because I don't think it should be underestimated how powerful our unconscious minds are and how connecting to these parts of ourselves and freeing them of whatever burdens had they've been carrying around give us the opportunity to then um, connect with those parts in a way where their talents and skills and genius can come forward. Like I have a part that um, speaks for, like, you know, taking care of my body, like health stuff. And I will actually consult this part, like, you know, like what do I, you know, what kind of supplements should I be taking right now? Or, you know, if I'm not feeling well, like what do I need? How do I take care of myself right now? And there's a lot of a lot of power in being able to interact with your own unconscious like this, because like you can never really understand entirely how it comes up with the answers that it comes up with. And you know, it would be like trying to see every line of code in your computer at once. You can't do it, you know. But if you have a relationship with yourself that is wholesome, that's not the right word, like healthy and trusting enough and loving enough to you know, to trust what's coming out of there. And I'm not saying you should always trust it, because they come up with all sorts of things. But if you have the type of relationship where you recognize, you know, when to trust that and how to utilize that information, then it gives you access to utilizing this, like, you know, processing power that just scratches the surface. So logical analysis is not going to give you the kind of um, processing power that you can have through your intuition if you know how to tap into this. And there were a number of people that touched on magic as being one of the subjects that was an interest of them regarding the eighth house. And I just want to say that I know this topic makes a lot of people uncomfortable, and I don't want to alienate anyone here, but the main things that I want to express regarding magic are: number one, there's nothing that's supernatural. If it exists, it's natural, right? Or it wouldn't exist. Number two, we are all always doing magic. It's just a matter of whether we recognize what we're doing or not. And number three, especially if you're going to be like intentionally doing any kind of magic, it's important to understand where the limitations are and kind of how it all works, because you can inadvertently create some issues for yourself that didn't need to be there if you're screwing around with it too much. Pisces is kind of all about just like flowing with life and, recognizing that we can ride the waves, but we don't need to control the currents, Um, there's kind of a surrender with the higher expression of Pisces in the 12th house. We don't have that with the 8th house. When it comes to the 8th house, it's like, tell me what the laws of the universe are because I want to use them to make things happen the way I want them to happen. And I guess one of my main cautions are don't get too carried away with it. Like don't don't get too extreme with it. It's really, really, really important to have a very strong connection with your inner compass, your sense of what feels right when you're tinkering with anything like that, because it does work. And a lot of times there are unintended consequences, or you get what you want and it is not what you actually need, what's actually good for you. So I think it's pretty important if you're going to do that sort of thing to make sure that it really feels right. And I would also say that it's important to recognize that everything that we say is a spell. And sometimes people, when they realize how powerful words are, start to feel like they shouldn't express things. Like if they're having a doubt about something, they feel like maybe I shouldn't verbalize it because, oh no, my words are powerful. And if I say that I'm worried about this happening, then it's going to happen. And I have found that if I'm in a safe space, whether it's with another person, with a group of people, just journaling, whatever the case may be, if I acknowledge that it's a part of me that has this concern, then it, instead of having, that kind of impact where, oh man, now I said it, it's going to happen. If like, I don't need to worry about that if I'm expressing it as a part of me is worried that this thing is going to happen. A part of me feels like this about this situation. A part of me is thinking that maybe this is the way it is. I think that it's safe to do that when it's safe to do that. And I'm not saying that we should all go around telling everybody the contents of our inner world all the time. And in fact, I think that it's important to acknowledge in the essence of the nature of the 8th house that a certain amount of privacy and secrecy is called for when we're doing inner work, that we should only tell people things about us and about what's happening inside of us when it feels right to do so. And when I'm talking to these unconscious parts of myself, I will actually ask them if they're okay with me sharing something before I share it, because if they're not, then I'm not going to. Like, I need to respect my own privacy. And I suggest that to others as well, like, just check, if part of you tells you something, check in with that part before sharing it with others. And, just make sure that part's okay with it. And when it comes to divination, This is a form of finding out hidden things, right? Um, a lot of people feel really uncomfortable with it because they've been told through their lives that if you mess with this kind of thing, you can attract demons to you. And like I was raised being taught that sort of thing. And then I kind of got over that fear and started doing a lot of divination and channeling and all sorts of fun things. And then I discovered that they were right in a way. So, um, first of all, I very highly recommend not using Ouija boards, just throwing that out there. Like, I always tell people do whatever feels right to you. Don't listen to anybody else over yourself, over your own like inner compass. Only you can know what's right for you. So, having thrown that disclaimer in front of this, just don't use Ouija boards. It's bad news. So, using a Ouija board is basically like putting an ad on Craigslist in the personal section that has photos of yourself, your address, your full name, and your phone number. like you are inviting just anybody to show up and start following you around if you do that. Like if you're going to work with any kind of channeling or divination, it's important to be pretty intentional about who you're going to interact with. And divination can be used just to explore your own inner world. It doesn't even necessarily need to be connecting to anything else out there. But if you're not intentional and kind of aware of um, how to connect to certain energies or certain parts of yourself, certain whatever it is you want to connect with, and also to discern if something else is actually what's coming through, then yeah, you can be opening yourself to dealing with some of this stuff that you probably don't actually want to deal with. So I think it's important to be aware of that. And this is bringing me to the topic now of sex and magic. So when I say magic, what I'm talking about essentially is just, all right, so energy precedes manifestation. Like everything that happens in the world of form around us started as energy. And I learned this very, very clearly for myself. Like I kind of already knew it, like I knew it on a certain level, but I learned it very strongly for myself when I was living somewhere that was extremely bad for me, and like energy just awful in terms of the energy that was there around me. And I could open myself up to feel the energy that was incoming. And as I did this, I could feel the energy of the next place where I was going to live. And the contrast was so incredible that there was no mistaking. Um, there was no mistaking which energy I was feeling when. So I could open myself up and feel that energy coming in. And it was a lot better feeling than where I was. And I just tuned into it and focused on it as much as I could. First of all, to attune my own energetic system to that energy to help me like actually physically uh, create the circumstances, or allow the circumstances to attune myself to those circumstances, and also to just kind of get away from focusing on where I was because it was so unpleasant. So it did end up pretty quickly, within like 2 or 3 months, I want to say. I went from living in like the worst conditions that I had lived in to living in the best conditions that I had lived in. And it was um, a very rapid and dramatic change. And it became really clear to me that not only does energy like absolutely precede manifestation, the physical stuff, but it's also something that we can consciously tune into. And as we do this, it attunes our own energetic system and our bodies and our minds to that situation. And then we can bring it into our lives more rapidly and comfortably and effectively. So, with energy preceding manifestation, what like basically when we're doing magic, what we're doing is we are tuning into a certain type of energy and and focusing on it with some intention, and then just allowing it to happen, you know, in the world around us or in our bodies or whatever it is that we are doing. And you know, different traditions have different ways of doing this. um, I would even say that Christian prayer is a form of magic, that, you know, you are putting your will into a spiritual practice and, you know, attempting to tap into, you know, divine power and utilize it to a certain end. That is magic. You are doing a spell when you are praying for something. I have a lot of Christians in my life, and I have specifically told them that if they want to pray for me, they should pray only that God's will be done in my life, none of their own wish list. Otherwise, I consider it a spiritual attack. And I've repeated this to them. Do you trust God? Yes. Do you trust God's will? Yes. Only pray that God's will be done in my life. Don't pray that I'm going to get back with my ex-husband. Don't pray that I'm going to go to church. Don't pray for anything in particular for me. No, nothing specific, only that God's will be done. So I actually, as a very, very energy sensitive person, can actually feel this like pressure on me when I need to so basically, essentially on a daily basis, I clear other people's prayers, spells, curses, enchantments. I have like a kind of a list that I go through for me that are for anything other than the divine flow of life. Ugh, I just felt it. And when I do this, there's like this, it's like almost like a, like there's so much less pressure on me that it's almost like this whoosh, like I feel like I can float for a moment. And it's really powerful for me. And I don't know if other people are going to necessarily feel it as strongly if they're not particularly energy sensitive, but I'm extremely energy sensitive, and I do feel it that strongly. So, um, you know, just keep in mind that other people have intentions for you as well, whether they realize they're doing this kind of thing or not, and that it can be cleared. And I was going to start talking about sex, and then I kind of diverted to this other like energy thing. Sex and magic, that's what I was getting into. So when it comes to doing energy work, one of the easiest ways to get started doing energy work, so actually the two easiest ways, I'd say. One of them is just to use your hands. So if you move your hands very close together, you can actually feel your own energy in the other hand. And you can pull it apart, put it back together, and you can actually like make an energy ball like in like Qigong or Tai Chi, not Qigong, like in Tai Chi. Oh no, Qigong as well. Um, you can actually form an energy ball and kind of like expand and contract and start to feel it that way and move it around. And you can like store it in your lower abdomen. You can release it. So that's one way. And then another way is through sex, whether it's with a partner or just on your own. If you can focus on the sexual energy building during a sexual experience, and then focus on allowing that energy to move throughout your whole body instead of just focusing in, like that general area. Um, you can learn to move energy around. That's a very, because sexual energy is a lot more obvious than other types of energy to feel. Like it's people that aren't super energy sensitive are usually can still feel sexual energy, I think. So you can also kind of play with moving it around with your hands, like, just throughout your body. And women, I don't know if men can or not, but I know women can actually give themselves nipple orgasms like this and can actually move the energy around throughout their bodies in an experience like that as well. So this is a really wonderful way to start playing with energy work a little bit if it feels right to do so. And one of the benefits of when you're having a sexual experience to moving the energy throughout your body is that then you can have a full body orgasm once it finally builds to the point of orgasm, because instead of just having that, focused in one area, now you've got it, building up throughout your entire body. And one of the things that I've found is that sexual pleasure is very, very, very much heightened when you start to do your own depth work, your own shadow work or like inner healing work, because as you do that, you develop a capacity to experience more intensity and more just in general. Your capacity to experience is increased dramatically as you do this kind of work. And it doesn't just mean that you can hold space for pain when you're in pain. You can also hold space for pleasure when you're experiencing pleasure too, and just stay with it and feel it much more fully. And as you get into this kind of thing, it can be a bit of a meditative experience. And again, that's solo or with a partner. I find it's easier solo for this kind of thing in a way because partners can be pretty distracting. But you can make it a meditative experience where you, instead of focusing on your thoughts, you can just focus entirely on the sensations and the energy experience that you're having. And you can also open yourself up to receiving energy like from another source. So you can just take in white light, or if you're with a partner, or like even if you're solo but you have a partner and they're okay with it, you can open yourself up to receive their energy, and that makes for a much deeper sexual intimacy. I would caution not to do this with somebody if you do not have their permission to do so, because now you're playing with magic and you're doing something without consent of another person, and that can be problematic. There can be some backlash from doing that, and it's also just kind of like not very nice. Like, just gonna throw that out there. So I think it's a good way to develop a deeper intimacy with somebody if you have that person's consent and you're looking to form a more intimate, energetic bond and just deeper emotional intimacy with the person. So, whether you're together or solo, you can do that. And it's kind of interesting. Like, you can open yourself up to okay, so my experience has been that if I'm doing this solo, I actually end up getting more and more and more like turned on instead of like getting a little bit of like release and satisfaction, it can actually just keep ramping up for a while, and then it ends up being and you know, like not like a like you know it like if you want to make an afternoon of it or whatever, it's a good time to do something like that. But you know, if you're just looking for a quick little release, it might not be the time to play with energy and do magic when you're doing that kind of thing, because um, yeah, it can be a wonderfully rewarding experience, but it can take a little while. Um, and then when you are with a partner, and actually, if you're doing this and you're not with a partner, one of the things that you can do is, you know, if you happen to know that you have a particularly healthy heart chakra, and um, you know, that's something that's definitely worth exploring if you're not sure. But what you can do is, as you are bringing in their energy, and you're doing this whether you're intentionally doing it or not, but if you're aware of it as you're bringing in their energy, you can bring it into your heart space and just hold their energy there in love, and then return it. Um, and you can actually do like an energy healing on a partner as well during a sexual encounter by doing this. And what else about all that? Just a word of caution, I guess. So, as always, do whatever feels right to you, do whatever you want to do. But I would just say, I think that sexual encounters with people impact us a lot more energetically than most people realize. And it's important to choose our partners wisely, because whatever kind of, you know, energetic debris, that's not quite the right word. Well, energetic anything that they happen to be carrying around with them, we can pick that up in a sexual encounter with them. And the more we open ourselves up energetically to our partners, the more deeply rewarding the experience is going to be, but the more they can energetically impact us as well. And even if we're not opening ourselves up intentionally, if we are having a sexual experience with somebody, there's an energetic merging that's going on. And it is a type of transformation. There's a third energy that's created. And it's also kind of a little bit like combining two chemicals, and there's a chemical reaction. Like both of those chemicals are changed now. So another thing to consider is that when we have sexual experiences with people, we get an energy cord between us and them. And those energy cords, a lot of times, just stay there until they're cut. So, this applies not just to like any kind of sexual encounter, this is also for like any kind of energy work, any kind of intuitive work, divination, any kind of emotional exchange, just being emotionally connected with people, um, and other ways too. Like we can form these energetic connections to people, and we actually can cut the energetic cords between us and other people. So it's not such a bad idea to just, you know, clean that up a little bit. There is a meditation that I found on YouTube that I found just wonderfully healing. It was kind of hokey sounding. The woman has this like unidentifiable accent that sounds just like she made it up, and it's you know, it's just a little bit hokey sounding. However, I have recommended this video to a lot of people because it changed my life pretty dramatically. I intended to cut the energetic cord between me and this person that I was involved with at a certain point. And once I started doing the meditation, I ended up just knowing that I needed to cut the energy cord between myself and an ex instead. And as soon as I did it, I felt better than I had felt in since like 1998. Like it was, I had no idea how strongly this person was impacting me through this energetic connection. And it was a deeply psychologically healing experience too. So if you want to find this particular video and try it yourself, it's like cutting cords and dissolving them into light, or cutting energy cords and dissolving them into light. And dissolved is misspelled with two S's in this particular video. But so, anyways, like it's a very powerful video in terms of both energy work and psychological healing. And I recommend checking it out if it feels right to do so. And then as far as emotional intimacy as related to the eighth house, the more aware of what's happening inside of us we are, the more we can communicate that to other people. And it gives us a capacity to do it, like when we're doing this right, it gives us the capacity to do it in a way that's gentle and honors both ourselves and them. And that can be very disarming. And when we're present with this, and when we're present with people, it kind of invites them and gives them an opportunity to do the same with us. And that's what intimacy is all about, sharing and being vulnerable, and emotionally connecting with people, and just being present with people and being open. So that also, of course, creates an opportunity, if it happens to be with somebody who is a sexual partner, to really have a much richer and deeper and more rewarding sexual experience together. And if it's not a sexual partner, then it's just, the emotional intimacy and the ability to communicate your needs and your boundaries. Well, if something makes you uncomfortable, being able to say that effectively without needing to be tough about it can really just transform any kind of relationship into a stronger and healthier one. And give people an opportunity to honor whatever you're putting out there for them. And if they don't honor it, then it gives you an opportunity to recognize that and, respond accordingly, depending on the situation. Okay, let me see here. Was there anything else that is particularly relevant to the eighth house besides the depth work, the inner healing work? Because we're about to talk a lot about that. But is there any other subject related to the eighth house that I haven't touched on enough here? Or, any questions related to just the general nature of the eighth house?
Yeah, I had something. Does it have to do with fears and trauma as well? Like our
Yes.
deepest fears, or I say trauma in relation to maybe some things that people just hide about themselves.
Yes, absolutely. And so that is part of what I was about to start talking about, and I am going to get into all of that, but absolutely 100%. Yes, that's eighth house stuff. Any other questions before I get into that?
Um, I was curious about, me personally, I have Saturn retrograde in the eighth house. And I really identify with a lot that you were sharing. earlier, Joanne. I was curious about your eighth house placements. Not that I have to have an answer about that. I just was curious. And I did before you answer or respond, I do want to share something I saw on social media the other day about darkness. When you open up, you were talking about the eighth house and darkness. And I just saw a really cool post that said, can we please stop associating darkness with evil? Close your eyes and dream. Whenever you meditate, your eyes are closed. So that's darkness. The sky of the universe is at all times in darkness. And, it just helps to kind of, I guess, unprogram ourselves about how we often relate darkness to something negative or something bad. Because if you think about our creation, it comes from darkness. When God said, let there be light, before the light came, he was, or God, I don't like to say he, but God was, in darkness per se. So I just wanted to share that as well.
Thank you. So I have Pluto in my eighth house, and my eighth house is in Libra. And I think that anytime you have a challenging placement in the eighth house, so with Saturn in particular, hard lessons related to privacy, secrecy, related to energetic merging with the wrong people, maybe related to, another major theme with the eighth house that I haven't really touched on yet is grief, loss. Death is, we can't really know for sure what's on the other side of death until we experience it. So that is kind of like the ultimate eighth house theme, really. And anytime we go through a transformation, it's a figurative death and rebirth. There's I can't remember who says it, but some old school philosopher said you can never step into the same stream twice, because we are constantly changing and transforming in life. But sometimes it's a major transformation. And when it is, we are becoming a different person, and we have to grieve the loss of who we used to be in a way. But in a way, those parts are still always with us. They're just different. But when it comes to wow. I'm sorry, I lost the thread that I was holding on to about where we started with this. Saturn, that's what it was. So when it comes to painful placements like Pluto, Saturn, Chiron, Neptune, depending. Well, I mean, Neptune can be a pretty painful placement. Any of the more painful placements that we might have can be very potent in terms of what we're going to get out of the eighth house in our life. Because when we experience pain somewhere, we don't get to just ignore it. we have to deal with it. And with Saturn in particular, this history of painful experiences can give us a really profound wisdom in that area, and can give us an ability to really have a lot of success in that area later in life. Once we go through that school of hard knocks and learn those harsh lessons that Saturn has for us. And somebody asked about an intercepted eighth house, and anytime, so houses actually can't be intercepted. I know a lot of people use that phrase, but they're actually called duplicated. And when that happens, it means that you need to access it through the house in front of it. So I actually have a video about this on YouTube about interceptions just in general that you could check out. But so basically in this situation, it's like the seventh house would sort of overshadow the eighth house. Like you don't really get to delve into the eighth house that much because the seventh house is just so much more the focus, and anything that you get into in the eighth house is going to be born of seventh house stuff, like even more than it usually is, because it's, you know, kind of natural for one house to lead into the other one. But in this particular case, like, you know, it's kind of like a room inside of a room in a way. And then it's important to, you know, to go through the seventh house to get to the eighth house. And I'm wondering if anybody else has any questions. I do, I was the one that brought it up, but I do kind of want to touch on grief a little bit as related to the eighth house. And just in general with the eighth house, I think that it's very important to balance out any kind of focus on the eighth house with focus on the second house, with simple pleasures in life, with enjoying things that you like, with focusing on stability in your physical conditions, because this kind of work, depth work, is very destabilizing. I mean, the very nature of it is transformation. It's destabilizing. And when it comes to doing this kind of thing, slow is fast. And it's important to mind your health, you know, have healthy meals that are nutritious and delicious. Just take, you know, make sure you get enough sleep, just, you know, really take care of yourself physically to balance out this kind of inner work. Because, and grief is a type of inner work, because it's important to, you know, take care of your nervous system, take care of your immune system, because this kind of work really changes your neurology, you know, the way your neurological circuits, your nervous system is wired actually changes when you do this kind of work. And that's a beautiful thing. But, you know, if you do too much too quickly, it can, you know, cause your immune system to be weaker, or can, you know, create just stress in the body and create health issues like that. And, you know, other areas of your life can get out of balance if you, you know, don't focus enough on just taking time to enjoy pleasant things in life. So when you start to explore your unconscious, a lot of times it can be a bit scary and dark, especially at first. And when I say dark, I mean the other kind of dark, like, you know, well, okay, I'm gonna get back into that in just a moment. But it is important to focus on simple, light pleasures, and you know, just pleasurable things to balance it out. And when it comes to grief, just honor the process and let your body lead the process. That when, you know, any kind of deep grief, let your body lead the process, and just know that it is a process. It'll change. It'll be a little bit different every day, probably. And just let yourself experience it, and just do whatever you can to support your health and let your body lead. So, all right, I'm going to go ahead and get into the depth work part of it then. So, there's different ways to do shadow work or depth work or inner healing, or, you know, getting to know your own unconscious. And I've experimented with a lot of them because this is, you know, very interesting to me. While I only have the one eighth house placement, I have my moon in Scorpio in the ninth house. So exploring this sort of thing is a passion for me. It's kind of my life's work in a way. You know, I've looked at a whole bunch of different ways of doing it, and so far IFS is absolutely my favorite, and it's changed my life dramatically for the better. And so what do we find when we start to look into our own inner worlds? The question earlier was, is it, is there scary stuff in there? And the answer is, yeah, it can look pretty scary at first. However, what I have found, and this is kind of a universal experience as far as, so the person who actually developed the IFS model, his name is Richard Schwartz, and he's worked since the 80s doing this as his life's work, and has worked with many, many people, probably tens of thousands of people, if I'm not mistaken, certainly thousands and thousands of people. And what he said matches my own experience, and that's that a lot of times when you first meet a part, it's very, very like scary looking. It can be very aggressive, or talk about things that people don't usually talk about. And it's there's a reason that these things get repressed. So repression is a very, very important thing for our brains to be able to do, because there's no way we could survive without being able to repress things. We only have access to the things that we are ready to work with, and ready to access. Like just last night, I had something come up, and I'm like, wow, I can't believe after all this time, I only got access to this just now. I didn't even know it was there prior to that, and it kind of surprised me. But I know that it's because a certain level of self-trust has been built up in my system, and I've addressed enough things with other parts of me that now it was, time for this particular thing to come up. So, it sort of comes up when we're ready to handle it, and it gets repressed until then. And the types of things that we repress are things that are not socially acceptable, or things that are scary to us, things that have been punished in our experiences in the past, things that we don't want to believe we have the capacity to do. And I will tell you, as someone who's explored my own inner world quite a bit, I have found multiple homicidal parts of myself. And I have found multiple suicidal parts of myself. And I have found all sorts of, things that, polite society would say are just generally unacceptable and just not okay. And so what I was starting to say earlier with, it can look really scary at first. It can, looks like there's monsters inside of us. Once you actually work with that part, essentially all of them, in the end, once they release whatever burden they're carrying, are essentially just very lovable and hurt children. Like if they're carrying a burden that makes them like look or sound like that, it's because there's a lot of pain there. And once they release that burden, then they don't look scary anymore. They look like a little kid or a teenager usually. Like I think, like in my case, most of mine are around like 5 or so years old, but a lot of times they're, whatever age they took on that burden. So for those who don't really know what I'm talking about with these different parts of myself, I'm going to just very briefly explain what IFS is. So if you've seen the movie Inside Out, you might have some concept of like what it might look like in somebody's inner world when there's different parts of them that are interacting, and different parts at the control panel. Those were the characters inside the little girl's head in the movie Inside Out, and that's a somewhat accurate representation of the way it really is inside of each of us. But instead of like different parts being different specific emotions, what I find is that different parts each have their own range of emotions. And, you know, there's a whole variety of different parts that can get angry, for example. There's not just one part that's anger. But another way to explain it would be if you think about times when you've seen in a movie or in a like book or TV show or whatever, if somebody has multiple personalities, or it's called dissociative identity disorder, where, you know, one moment they're Sam and then, you know, they switch into an alter ego and now they're Janet, and, you know, they're a totally different age, different gender, different, you know, sometimes they even, this is really wild, sometimes they even, the same individual will have an alter ego that's diabetic and needs insulin or will go into diabetic shock, and other parts not, or other alter egos not. Some that need glasses and some don't. So that just kind of gives you an idea of how powerful these parts can be and how strongly they can impact our bodies. Some have allergies that some don't. Like it's pretty wild. So anyways, the idea essentially, oh, I made myself blurry. I'm back. Okay. So essentially the idea with IFS is that what we see externally in people that have dissociative identity disorder is something that we actually all experience internally. And it's kind of normal to be a little bit like, ooh, I don't know, that sounds crazy, like the first time you hear about this, because, you know, we're like, for most people, the only exposure that we've had to this is in the context of people with multiple personalities. And it is, you know, in their cases, something that really messes with their lives. And I don't like the word crazy, unless, like, I don't know, if I say it, I mean it in a way that, like, I'm excited about something, like, oh man, that's crazy. But anyways, to use the word in this context, though, you know, a lot of times we're like, oh, that's crazy. Like, you know, somebody's crazy if they have that. But what it actually is, and that's what IFS is all about, is an extreme extreme version of something that we all experience, just like most psychological disorders. Though when it gets too extreme, then it's a disorder. And the reason that these people have that experience where, you know, different parts of them just take over is because they experience really, really, really severe trauma at some point that kind of just blew their system apart. And when I say system, what I mean is the relationship inside of them among all of the different parts of them. So what happens is we're born and we have all these parts, and then as we have different experiences in life, these different parts take on different roles, different, you know, different memories might be held in different parts, different preferences, different like sub personalities. Like we have all these like sub personalities inside of us. And sometimes they carry some pretty heavy burdens. If there was something that we couldn't deal with at the time, it just, you know, part of us just hangs on to that and carries that with us, and it doesn't go away until something happens that allows us to, what IFS calls, unburden that part of ourselves. So I'm curious as to whether anybody has questions yet at this point. All right. So what I would like to do now is hear from different people that are here about their experiences in terms of, okay, so the idea of this is that um, sorry, let me just, okay. So the idea of it is that if there's a part of you that would like to just share something, a concern, or if you think that your eighth house development or like the health of your eighth house is being impacted by whatever, by whatever. If you have a concern about your eighth house and you know whether you're thriving in your eighth house or not, then if this part would like to share, then I welcome people to, you know, come forward and we can talk about it. And what I can do is help you recognize what different parts involved in it are, because usually there's multiple parts that are all you know, interacting in some way inside of us regarding this. Like that's what inner conflict is. And I can help you recognize the parts, and then you can talk to these parts, you know, later on and just see what they need and possibly unburden them. And when they're unburdened, it's a really beautiful thing, because now this part that's been carrying around this thing that's been so difficult for so long, now they're free to do something else instead. And a lot of times they can end up being playful, creative. Sometimes they just want to get some rest for a while. And in the very least, that inner conflict gets resolved, and then you know yourselves better too. So there's that. And the idea of IFS is to become self-led. So we all have all these parts, but we also have this like core self, like that's not just like a part of us. It's like our like true core self. And when we interact with parts, if we interact with them from self, then self has this wisdom that can be shared and experienced. And self is like compassionate, caring, loving, accepting. There's a like a calmness, there's patience with self. So when we can recognize that when we're hurting, it's parts of us that are hurting, we are in a position then to nurture and care for those hurting parts of us from self. And it just makes all the difference in the world. Instead of just sitting there suffering, we are in a position to really heal ourselves and take care of ourselves on a level that we weren't before. So I would say if you would like to share something, if part of you wants to bring up some kind of concern, or you know, what your struggles are related to eighth house matters, just ask inside, are there any parts of me that don't feel comfortable discussing this? And if you get the all clear, then I would love to talk about it. So is there anybody that would like to share?
Um,
Hi there.
Hi. I've realized that I have couple like multiple parts that are like in you know, conflict about that, like, and especially like the eighth house versus second house things. Like when you presented it is like, you know, digging deep and like things like that versus like just simple things that like you enjoy. Like it's like I feel like it's like I have parts that feel like I have to pick one or the other, and I have like different ones on different sides, and it's I have no idea how to make them, how to help them get along and to balance and like have them both allowed to get attention and not have the other one feel like I'm going to ignore them forever if I give the other one attention.
Right. So this is a pretty classic example of the type of thing that IFS is really wonderful for. And I would say to hear both of them out, like you could even just ask them right now, are you interested in exploring, what your concerns are related to, like, let's say, eighth house stuff.
I don't know, I have tried, like, it's like one of those things where like I don't know, they don't want to say everything yet.
Yeah. Well, I
Yeah,
mean,
like,
that's understandable.
I don't know how to make progress really.
Yeah. So what I would do in that situation is ask yourself, how do you feel about it?
Well, one of them is like really impatient and just wants to get to the bottom of everything, and that's like kind of one of the parts that's like involved in this, and like I actually had a really hard time like getting this part to like not just be me. Like
Mm-hmm.
she didn't even want to take a physical form, for she was just like a dark colored nebula, and then like decided on to be a big dragon. Like, yeah, like she just wants to say she's me, basically.
Yeah, understandable. So that's what blending is. So when parts do this, when they blend with us, like, so they become like our conscious experience and we're identified with them a lot of times, it happens because they don't feel safe to step back. They think that there's something that's really important that they need to do, and if they don't do it, we're not going to get our needs met, and we're not going to, or something bad is going to happen. So what I would do in your position is ask this part, like, what do you think is going to happen if you don't do what it is that you've been doing? And then if that happens, then what happens? And just get to the bottom of it from that perspective. And what I find with parts is that they pretty much always have a good point about something. It's just the way they're going about it may not be as effective as other options, and they don't know that because they're too focused on on their perspective of what they think they need to do. And a lot of them, like I said, are like children essentially, because when we take on a burden, like a part of us takes on a burden, that part stops maturing at that age usually. And, they can look or sound older, or not even human, like, in the case of a dragon, or, that's definitely a thing that happens. But like in terms of maturity, they remain at the age that they were whenever this burden was taken on. And we're born with some of these burdens, by the way. They're called legacy burdens in IFS, and sometimes we absorb them from the environment around us too. And not all of them are ours, but that doesn't mean that we don't get impacted by them. So I would well, what I started saying is, like, I asked you how you feel about these parts, and you said that you are have a tendency to be blended, or in the past would be blended with one of them. And there's some impatience there, but you've identified this part now. So how do you feel about this part?
It's, well, I guess it's kind of complicated. Like I don't know, I think she's really cool, like, but like also that she like has good intentions, but is like she's undermining herself because like her whole area of concern is like my own spiritual development, like, you know, wants to have like a purpose in life and um that kind of thing. So yeah, I don't know. It's even if she steps back, it's like it's hard to get her to step back completely. Like she's still, I don't know. I don't know if it's her talking or another part talking that's like, or if I don't even know if like parts can have parts or
Yeah,
yeah, like she probably, I think she has a bunch of parts, like also.
sure. That parts can have parts, yes. And when there's a part that has played like a big role in our psyche, in our lives, that we've been blended with a lot, I think a lot of times they usually do have multiple parts themselves, and you can actually ask them about their parts and interact with them in that way too. I guess what I'm wondering is which part of you wants to resolve it? So the thing about self is that self doesn't have an agenda.
Right.
So
Yeah.
so then the question is, um, which part wants to resolve it, and why? Like, what'll happen if you don't resolve this?
That like I'll just be stuck on this like planet forever and like never make any progress, I guess.
So the idea is to avoid the suffering of Earth.
Yeah, well, it's I don't even know if it's about suffering, but just like a sense that like I don't know, this planet isn't good enough. Like, you know, like I feel like feeling like I should be at like I could be at a higher dimension. The idea that I'm like forced to be here means that there's some kind of like flaw about me.
Gotcha. So then part of you is looking for a way to escape that, and part of you wants to just enjoy it while you're here.
Yeah, I guess it's sort of like that. I noticed that sorry, cars.
It's fine.
The part that wants to just like focus on like smaller things, she like especially like that part especially likes like, you know, just like getting into like fictional characters and stuff like that and enjoying other stuff that the other part like thinks is like really pointless. But like I asked the part who likes to like fiction and stuff, and her thing that she said was that it was like she would
Make sure it's
be
okay with her before you share, by the way. Like, I can feel a little bit of hesitation. So I would just make sure it's okay to share.
yeah, well, she's I think that I just say that it's like a feeling of like being lonely without it, and
Right.
then she doesn't want to share more than that.
Right. So there's a part that's looking for meaning and depth, and a part that's just trying to distract from um, in a way, from kind of the lack of the meaning and depth. Does that sound accurate?
Sort of, I don't know, like it's like the sense that if I like stop paying attention to like the fictional characters I like, that like I'm like betraying them or like betraying myself, even though, you know, that sounds silly.
Oh, well, parts are very rarely particularly rational, um, and I don't really think of them in terms of like being silly or anything like that. I find that sort of thing endearing. So but you are probably dealing with a pretty young part though. So one of the things that's important to know about IFS is that when it comes to parts that play protective roles, which is most of them, they're not going to stop doing what they're doing as long as they have an exile that they are trying to protect or trying to keep from coming out. So in IFS, there's like 3 different essential kind of parts. We've got our firefighters, and they're the ones that react to a painful or scary situation with things like drinking, blowing up, like eating too much, or like any kind of behavior that's designed to make us feel better, essentially. And then there's managers who try to like control us to avoid issues with, like if the firefighters like run rampant, then then what'll happen? If I, like eat an entire chocolate cake every time I feel sad, then I might have some health consequences from it. So I might have a manager that tries to control my diet, as an example. So they're not going to stop doing what they're doing as long as they have an exile that they're either protecting or trying to keep from surfacing. So the exiles are the parts of us that carry shame, fear, like pain from a rejection or perceived rejection. Like they're the ones that carry the heavy stuff that we don't want to address. And basically, or like not that we don't want to, but that we're not in a position yet to address. And basically, in order to get those protective parts to stop doing what they're doing, you need to address whatever's going on beneath the surface, whatever pain that exile is carrying around, whatever burden that exile has. So because I'm not a therapist, by the way, I forgot to say that this time, I'm not a therapist and I'm not officially trained or certified in IFS. This is, I am what we call IFS informed, not IFS certified. So anyways, so because I'm not a therapist and, we're not doing therapy, we really can't like find out what's going, we really can't go to exiles and like do unburdening here in a session like this. But what I would say is ask them about the exile. Where's the exile that they're protecting? And it's possible that there's some deep loneliness or like some kind of fear that's underneath all of that. And once you give that part, once you witness what that part has experienced, and just let that part know that you love him or her or it fully all the time, no matter what. And there's nothing that this part can ever say or do to lose that. And you're not going to punish or neglect or reject or blame this part for anything. And, you can, in your mind's eye, just like hold this part in love. Once that part is unburdened, then those protectors will be free to stop doing whatever it is they feel the need to do, and then they can do something else if they want to.
I would like to share, if everyone's all clear, I don't want to jump in too soon.
So I think Radha might be kind of having some connection issues. Radha?
No, I can hear you still.
Oh, you kind of like disappeared and came back and disappeared and came back. Okay. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that helps.
Okay. All right. Awesome. So then, yes, is it Kina? Is that how you pronounce your name?
Yes, it's Kina. Excuse me. I don't have anything to share from the other parts of myself, not this time, but I'm looking forward to starting to have those consciously have those conversations with the other parts of myself. I believe that I've done so unconsciously, especially through dreams. I have a lot of lucid dreams and just experiences with spirit, which is, I don't know if when I refer to spirit, I don't know if that's a if spirit is a part of those parts of me. I just excited and looking forward to that, and I'm just really grateful for finding you guys, finding this meeting, and this is my first time, like I said, having this kind of interaction. Just really excited about a lot of things that you shared today. I took
Awesome.
notes. I'm so excited that slow is good because I mean, when it comes down to magic or divination or any of those things, I've always been very curious and open to learning more about those things. Always been very respectful about my lack of understanding and not really moving too quickly. And I'm appreciative of that and having this information to help me move forward and slowly start to explore some of those things. Um, just wanted to say thank you,
You're welcome.
for the
I'm
most
glad.
part. Do you do these? Well, I'll be following you from now on. So I'm just, how often do you have these types of meetings?
Well, I have done two of them already, and then there's this one, so I've done it 3 times already. But what I'm actually starting now is a series of closed sessions like this, where um, I will record a class, like how the first like hour I just talked about the eighth house. I will record that separately and have that available to people to review, at their leisure before the group session. And then during the group session, we just focus on, questions and, interacting with each other and supporting each other and doing this. It's called, IFS calls it parts mapping, where we identify, parts and, see, what they might be up to. And then just explore ways that you can connect with them and bring more self presence into your interactions with them and just work with them. So there's
Awesome.
actually a series, and it's going to start with the first house and go all the way through all 12 houses, because the houses really do build on each other quite a bit and are very interconnected. So the idea of the series is that we can really change our lives by doing this kind of inner healing work and have very real, measurable, positive changes in our lives. So that's starting next week. The class, I intend to release them about Tuesday or so, just so people have enough time each week to review them before the group session, and then the group sessions will be on Sundays. So so that is $349 for like all 12 of them. And then there's a way to just make 3 payments instead of just paying it all up front. So that is available. And I also have an option to do just the classes and not the group sessions. And that's a little bit less. Or I also have an option to do like a package of 1-to-1 sessions in addition to the classes and the group sessions. And anybody who signs up for the group sessions is going to get a 1-to-1 as like part of that package anyways. So so yeah, there's different options available, but I will be doing like for 12 weeks just the the Sunday group sessions essentially that are part of that package.
Awesome.
Does anybody else have any concerns related to the eighth house, magic, intimacy, grief?
Yeah, I would like to share. I asked about fears, and I think that's like one thing for me that lately I've been realizing that I have a deep fear of betrayal by other people. And I know this isn't about the birth chart, but my eighth house is in Taurus and it opposes my second house in Scorpio. And I also have Pluto in the second house. I was really happy that this is the eighth house one to kind of go with that opposition there. And I've been realizing lately that I may be sabotaging relationships with people that truly do want to connect with me because of that fear of betrayal. But then on the flip side, I also find myself in long-term relationships with individuals who are betraying me and that I am not aware of until it's kind of too late.
Yeah.
So I guess how could I guess tackle that? I don't know if it's something that I need to learn how to better like pick up on traits from individuals, but it's also kind of weird because why am I always like on the opposite side of things? Either I'm letting go of people too early or I'm sticking around for too long.
The answer to that lies in your early childhood, most likely. So, what happens when we are born is for the first like 5 or 6 years, we're just little sponges. We're in a very receptive state where the things that we experience have a really profound impact on our psychological foundation for the rest of our lives, essentially. And I want to say it's like delta waves, but I read that a long time ago. But like our brain is in this state where we just absorb, and are very, very, very impressionable. And when we do this, like essentially our worldview and our concept of ourselves and what we expect to experience in our lives gets shaped, and then we move forward in life with those expectations and just keep creating the same types of situations for ourselves over and over again, even though parts of us are like, I didn't like that, I want something completely different next time around. And the pattern that I have had, I've been a bit of a serial monogamist in my life, and the pattern that I've had is that every relationship had like a couple like really major issues with it, and then I would try to find someone who was completely the opposite in my next relationship. It's like every relationship was like the antithesis to the last one, but I kept repeating the same patterns over and over again, and I like couldn't figure out how to stop, and I like kept looking for the issues and trying to find what was causing this, and not just in my relationships, with work and all over the place in my life. It was like the more things change, the more they stay the same. And I couldn't find myself really attracted to partners who would actually treat me well either. And the answer about that is called imprinting. So when we are very young, however we're treated, especially by our caregivers, creates this concept of what our role in a family is, and how we deserve to be treated, and how people just generally are and how they treat us. And then as we get older, we find ourselves attracted to people who feel familiar because we know how to work with that. Yeah, this, like, let's say like a parent was an addict and then you're attracted to addicts. It's because it feels familiar, because there are parts of you that are still trying to get the kind of care that you didn't get and needed when you were a kid, and sees this new person with these similar issues that you may or may not even consciously be aware of when you get into the relationship. But remember, our unconscious brains do 1,000,000 times more processing per second. They know a lot more than we do. They can pick up on all sorts of things. And we're all connected to the collective unconscious, so it picks stuff up that way as well. So essentially, we are drawn to people who are going to hurt us the same way we were hurt when we were a kid, over and over and over, until we are in a position to address those core wounds and heal those patterns. And once we do that, then we'll be in a position to be attracted to people who treat us differently. And man, this has been just a huge, huge thing for me in my life. I used to be very attracted to partners who were depressive and emotionally
Yes.
unavailable. Like
Yes.
I was, and like I would be like, even in friendships, I'd be attracted to depressive people, and it's because
Yes.
one of my parents was very, very depressed throughout my entire life, up until I was an adult. So, um, it felt familiar. It felt like home, and um, and then I was always trying to heal them because I could never heal my parent. So, it's just that pattern replaying itself. And once I was able to address that and and heal that pattern, now I am no longer drawn to potential partners who are depressed. So those patterns can be healed. Um, so one of the things you had asked is like, why is it like that? So that's why. It's because of the familiarity, um, and because it's what you're attuned to. Um, so how to address it, I think, is the same as with any other polarity within us, is just really hear out both sides and see what their concerns are. And I like I said before, like parts pretty much always have a good point. And a lot of times it's something that I was completely unaware of until I talked to them about it. And, once I discover like what the underlying thing there is, usually I can consciously bring awareness of that concern into, you know, my considerations and, whatever it is I'm consciously doing. And I can tell that part, like, you don't need to do this anymore. Like I see, and they know, if I can actually see the need that needs to be addressed. I see that need, and I'm going to take care of all of us, my whole inner family, my whole system. I'm going to take care of us. And you don't need to worry about this anymore. And it might take a little bit of time, like I'm at a point with my like inner family now where usually I can just let them know, like, I'll take care of this now that I'm aware of it. And there's um, like a certain momentum or like a tipping point of like self-trust that has been reached at this point where the parts will be like, okay, yeah, that's fine. But in the beginning it wasn't like that. In the beginning I needed to just be really patient and keep checking in and seeing if they need anything and how I can support them and not push them to stop doing what they're doing because they weren't ready to yet.
Yeah, you mentioned something about seeing that one of your parents suffered from depression and it being stemming from my early childhood. And it's all funny because I always say that I don't really remember my childhood. I don't really remember much of what happened prior to um, probably the age of 5, I would say. And I say the age of 5 because I remember specific things that happened to me during kindergarten. And I know you start kindergarten at 5. But other than that, I don't recall like those being themes in my household, like from my parents. Like I also attract a lot of depressed individuals, and I also take on this healing type of role, trying to help them. And then sometimes I guess I end up staying too long and trying to help them and realizing that I can't heal the world. And then that ends up hurting me because then I feel like a failure. I feel like I should have been able to help. And I'm learning now that that's not my job. For one, I need to heal myself first and foremost before I do anything. And then two, people can't change unless they truly want it for themselves. So I can't push healing or change onto anyone as well. But it really has made me question, I guess, my parents and their relationship dynamic. I do remember that my parents, they're not intimate people, I would say. Like, I didn't see them be like physically intimate. Like, I didn't see them necessarily kiss or hug a lot, or it was not a lot of I love yous around the house, nothing like that. So I don't know if that could play a role into it, but I don't think that's necessarily betrayal or being around like, or just being in a depressive type of environment. I don't know. I have a lot of questions about why I am the way that I am, and I have tried to look to my parents and to my childhood for answers. And I guess I do have to take that deeper look within myself, but I just don't know where a lot of the things came from.
Yeah. I find that what appears to be the theme a lot of times is like there's actually something deeper than that. So maybe there was a part of you that felt betrayed at a certain point, and looking back, you wouldn't, like it doesn't, like if a rational part of you is looking back at your memories, you're not going to see why. But there was something that was very, very important to you when you were at a certain point in time. And, now, looking at it now, it might not seem like a big deal, but it was then, and it had an impact. So, I mean, children, things that are important to children are not necessarily the things that adults would assume would be important to them. So, I did see, I've been not totally keeping up on the chat over here, but I did see that somebody had asked about past lives and like whether a past life can like show up as a part. And it does seem that way to me. Um, I've kind of wondered about this before. I know I have done some past life exploration and have had like a part that, or I have a part that is kind of like me in a past life. Um, or maybe it's the reverse. I don't know. But in any case, I do think that sometimes some of the stuff that we experience as burdens aren't necessarily from our own experience in this lifetime. Some of it was inherited through epigenetics, and so it's like way back in our family line somewhere. And some of it is from past lives, and some of it we pick up because like if we saw something happen to our neighbor when we were a little kid and it really made an impact on us, it can, something like that can end up being a burden too, even if it wasn't our own trauma. Even television shows, I think, can really could cause that kind of experience as well. So um, I'd say it just needs some more exploration, like ask that part, like not right now, but like, when it feels right, ask that part, when did you experience your first betrayal? What happened? Can you show me or tell me? You might get a little like movie in your mind about what happened. Um, and, all you need to do is just witness it and hold the part in love and interact with the part in whatever way feels right to you. And just be open and curious, and eventually the part will probably need to know that you're going to protect him or her, and that you're not a kid anymore, that this part might not know that, and that you can look out for potential threats. you know um, you can do what feels right, and try uh, blah, words. I'm going to take a step back. Okay, so when I have a part that's concerned about something, like I need to do this job, I need to, make sure that nothing bad is going to happen in this particular area. Usually, what they need to hear is, you don't need to do that anymore. I can take care of that now. I'm an adult now, and I'm safe now, and I've got a lot of tools that I didn't have then. And even if this thing ends up happening that you're worried about, I'm not going to blame you. It's not your fault. And you don't need to worry about it. I'm going to take care of you and love you no matter what. And you don't have to stop doing it if you don't want to. But if you do want to, I can take care of it now. And you can always come forward again and let me know if there's a problem, or just start doing your thing again if you feel like you need to at another point. But it's okay if you want to stop now.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. I feel like I fell really behind in the chat over here, but I'm wondering, is there anybody else that would like to ask anything or share anything? Any particular concerns related to the 8th house?
I have a general question about 8th house.
Sure.
So I was wondering what your thoughts are about 8th house cusp being in Leo. The way I always used to see the two signs, like Scorpio and Leo, are like complete opposite to each other in my mind. And I was wondering what you think when, like, my 8th house, the sign of my 8th house is Leo, and my sun is in Sagittarius, which is again like a fire sign, and like optimism, positivity. And so I'm just wondering what your thoughts are when 8th house is kind of governed by the sign of Leo.
Well, whatever sign your 8th house is in is going to experience some transformation in your lifetime. So the way you express yourself, all those Leo themes, is something that you'll likely experience some transformation in your lifetime.
Okay.
So I think a lot of people are a little bit curious about their specific charts, and I would say that the How to Read Natal Charts group is a good place to post those questions. I mean, there's probably a lot of people in the group that could share their own experiences with their 8th house being in Leo if you post that there. But I don't want to focus too much on people's actual charts during this session, because the actual like self-exploration and sharing is actually what the space is intended for.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I have something I'd like to ask too, but
Sure.
I'm not exactly like sure how to phrase it. Like it's still making sense in my head.
That's okay.
But like so I have 3 planets in the 8th house, my sun, Mercury, and Mars, and I also have a Scorpio moon. So it's a lot of like for me personally, it's a lot of like looking inwards and a lot of transformation. And I guess I'm just wondering, like, can it get to a point where it's too much? Like you have, yeah, okay,
Yes.
okay.
So what can happen when you focus too much on the 8th house or on Scorpio is that you can actually get addicted to pain. And when I say that, what I mean is, when we do this kind of inner exploration, a lot of times we find some pain that we didn't know was there. And it's a wonderful opportunity to witness it and release it. However, a lot of people don't know that it can be like lovingly witnessed, and instead they just relive it. And when you relive those experiences, it re-traumatizes your nervous system, and your mentality about it like if you're like, okay, this is a good thing, I'm going to, process this pain, and you focus on it too much, what ends up happening is your brain doesn't distinguish between emotional pain and physical pain. So it thinks that you're just physically in pain all the time as you are, re-experiencing these painful situations. And you actually get a bit of an endorphin rush from pain. Like your body will release some endorphins to help you cope with that pain. So then if you back off from, doing that kind of thing, then you go through endorphin withdrawals and you need to create more pain for yourself, either through like, re-experiencing a past trauma, which, by the way, when you do that, if you do it repeatedly, can actually get like saved in your brain as being worse than it actually was initially, if you keep like bringing up the same thing over and over again without actually releasing the burden attached to it. So you can end up essentially like getting addicted to pain. So that's one way it can be too much. Another way it can be too much is if you're just trying to fix yourself all the time. Like, why? To what end? Life gets a lot better when we do this kind of depth work, and we can really grow as a person, and we can experience a lot more inner peace, joy, and clarity from doing this kind of thing. But there's a lot more to life than just that. And if the focus becomes that to too great an extent, what ends up happening is we're missing out on opportunities to just enjoy living, and life becomes out of balance. Like there's no area in life that should have like tons of focus compared to other areas. Like it's pretty important to, focus on whatever needs focus at the time. And, that's what balance is, just kind of being sort of fluid with it. So for people with a heavy eighth house or any sign, I recommend focusing on the one opposite of it to kind of balance it out. And, it can still be helpful learning tools to do this kind of processing effectively, so that you're not just continually re-traumatizing yourself as you do it. But aside from that, it can actually be a bit like counterproductive to hit it too hard, to really put a lot of focus on it. I think it's important to do this kind of thing in a gentle and sort of flowy way. Like whatever comes up, just deal with whatever comes up, and you don't necessarily need to go looking for stuff, because as you find yourself in a position to deal with something, it'll just naturally come up, and life presents us with plenty of opportunities to get triggered by this or that. And then, something comes up, and then we can deal with it at that point.
I also want to add, I agree with everything you just said, Joy. I've been experiencing this heaviness for a few months now, since I started working on this. And it tends to get very heavy very quickly, and it's very draining. And one thing that has really helped in this process, which can help the person who asked the question, it helps to have something, how do I say, something that you do every day. It can be anything, but something very disciplined. It can be a meditation, a 5-minute meditation, or a 10 minutes walk, or a half an hour walk. But if you do something every day with a discipline, it kind of lightens this this heaviness that Joy was also talking about. It has helped me. Maybe it can help others too. Just wanted to mention that.
Thank you. I do think that it's important to do physical things. For me, it doesn't necessarily need to be the same thing every day. It can be, you know, different things as long as there's something, something that's good for me and enjoyable, something pleasant, and you know, just creating opportunities to enjoy life and you know, the simple pleasures, like I said earlier. And yeah, I definitely think that things like walks, baths, meditation, and even just like curling up in a big comfy blanket and like lighting a candle and like watching your favorite old movie or something like anything that's just like nice, basically.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
And there's no finish line with this stuff. Like there's no like place where you get to and then like you're finally like 100% healed and it's done and everything's just okay now. Even enlightenment, like there's a phrase before it's an old proverb: before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. And you know, life goes on is the idea. So actually, there's two different ideas that I'm kind of combining here. So as long as you're alive, there's always going to be more stuff that comes up. Like there's no point where you come to like ecstasy forever. Like there's no point where it's just pure bliss and you never have any pain ever again. And I think that's what a lot of parts of us are hoping for, is that like holy grail that's going to just like save us from all suffering forever and ever. But you know, being on Earth, we have all sorts of different experiences, and even if we could reach every little corner of our mind and heal every single part of us on every single level, you know, we'd still be living in the world connected to the collective unconscious. We'd still be absorbing stuff from other people and needing to process that. Like there's no, life can get a lot more pleasant, and even when there's challenges in life, it can be a lot easier to face those challenges when you have that kind of like self-trust and a center of like inner peace, and when you can experience all of it as just love, you know, like fabric of reality is love. Once you get to that point, like, yeah, it's all a lot easier, but you're never done. So the reason that I'm saying this is because I think a lot of people who are very focused on doing inner healing work do push too hard, do try to go too fast. And you will always be perfectly imperfect and infinitely loved. And you don't need to fix yourself in order to be worthy of love. You are loved. And it's okay to just not be okay sometimes, and it's okay to be imperfect, and we'll all always be imperfect. So I have a Scorpio moon too, so this is coming from a place of having been the one pushing too hard and, you know, trying to heal myself obsessively for decades. I'm done trying to fix myself. You know, if something comes up, I address it lovingly, but I'm not looking for issues anymore. And I'm not, you know, like I said, slow is fast when it comes to this sort of thing. And
Right.
and that's enough. That's enough. That's all we need to do. We don't need to push.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. That really helps. Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. Is there anybody else? Anything coming up for them? All right. Thank you, everybody. And I'm very happy that we did this, and I look forward to seeing a lot of you again. I'm just trying to think if there's anything else that I should say before I wrap up. If anybody is interested in those group sessions or even like one-to-one sessions or just the classes, there are links. Like there's a post with a link to like the different options for those things that's pinned in the announcements in the group. So feel free to check that out if it feels right. And I guess that's about it. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful evening. Bye.